All right, good morning, everyone. Hello, welcome to the webinar. I'm Shannon Grinsley, the Director of State Outreach for the Woodward Hines Education Foundation and the Get to College program. We are recording today's session and will send a link to anyone who is registered. For those watching the recording, today's date is September 14th, 2021, and the material in this webinar is current through the 21-22 school year. In today's session, federal and Mississippi financial aid updates. You will hear from Jennifer Rogers at the Mississippi Office of Student Financial Aid, and then you will also hear from Kierstan Dufour from Get to College. I will now share a little background on Get to College and a few logistics of the webinar before we get started. Get to College is a nonprofit program of the Woodward Hines Education Foundation. We have 3 centers in Mississippi, one in Jackson, Ocean Springs, and South Haven. And we help parents, students, and high school counselors with all aspects of college planning and financial aid. And all of our services are free. In our centers, we offer personalized college counseling appointments where we help students know when to apply for admission and scholarship, help fill out their Fafsa, the free application for federal student aid, or advise on essay writing and interview skills. As Kierstan said earlier, during this webinar, we cannot see or hear you, but you can ask us any questions through the chat or the Q&A at any time. So our agenda for the day, we will hear from our guest presenter and Kierstan first. Then we will answer any questions at the end of the webinar. And then we will go over some upcoming webinars and professional development opportunities. I would now like to introduce our speaker for the day. Jennifer Rogers is the Director of the Mississippi Office of Student Financial Aid. In that role, she oversees administration of a $43 million budget and all state-supported student financial aid programs. Since Jennifer took the leadership of the office in 2009, the office has reduced its administrative overhead while increasing the number of students eligible for the state's only need-based grant program by nearly 1,200%. Jennifer received her undergraduate degree from the University of the South, Sewanee in Tennessee, and her MBA from Millsaps College in Jackson. She is still in the process of working on her doctoral degree at the University of Mississippi and feels like that will all be completed very soon. So welcome, Jennifer. We're glad to have you. Obviously, you're very busy working on your doctoral degree and your day job. So we're glad to have you here today. After Jennifer gets done speaking, then we will then hear from Kierstan Dufour, our Assistant Director and Project Manager at Get to College, and she'll give you some FAFSA updates. So Jennifer, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and I'll control your screens today. So if I miss, I'll try to listen for your cues, but if I miss flipping to one, just let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. I'm glad to be here with you all today. Wish I could see your faces. Look forward to hopefully doing some of that later this year. I, of course, am Jennifer Rogers. I'm over at the Mississippi Office of Student Financial Aid. And despite all the upheaval that we've had over the last, 18 months or so, we are open for business. We are still here. We are still committed to you and your students and making sure that all of our Mississippi high school graduates have opportunities after college. So I think to get started, we can go ahead to the next slide now. I will start by just kind of giving you an overview of the 3 main grant programs. I think sometimes we just take for granted that everyone knows what all of our opportunities are for state aid in the state, and I don't want to take that for granted that you know all of that. So let's just briefly go over the state aid grants that are available for Mississippi students. The first is the Higher Education Legislative Plan Grant. We just call it HELP. HELP is the state's only need-based grant. Students have to be at least partially Pell eligible. They have to also meet certain income limitations. They need to have, but there are some merit qualifications as well. So students need to have a 20 on the ACT That can be a super score, which we're going to talk about a little in more detail a little later. They need to have a 2.5 high school GPA, and they need to have completed the HELP core curriculum, which we're also going to talk about in more detail a little bit later. The beautiful thing about the HELP grant is that it awards full tuition. So that is full tuition at a 2-year college. That is full tuition at a 4-year college. That is the equivalent of full tuition at one of our public institutions is paid to a private institution in the state. So very, very generous award there. MTAG is what I'm sure most people are familiar with. It's the Mississippi Tuition Assistance Grant. This is kind of more of like a residency grant. Students who are Mississippi residents who have at least a 15 on the ACT and a 2.5 GPA can qualify. The only catch here is that you cannot be full Pell eligible. So our state's neediest students actually do not qualify for MTAG. The award is $500 a year for freshmen and sophomores and $1,000 a year for juniors and seniors. And finally, our Mississippi Eminent Scholars Grant, or MESG, or Eminent Scholars, everyone calls it a little something different. This is our merit-based grant in the state, and it is available to students who are Mississippi residents with a 29 on the ACT or better, 3.5 GPA or better. And the award is $2,500 a year for 4 years. So basically $10,000 over the course of the college education. And just one thing to note, for all 3 of these programs, students must enroll in and complete 15 hours each term and maintain the required GPA. We can go on to the next slide. So how do students apply for state aid? Every year, the Mississippi Aid application, which we call the MAAPP, opens on October 1st. That is the same day that the Fafsa opens each year. This is a screenshot of our current year application. Obviously, this will update on October 1. The MAAPP is really pretty simple. It takes less than 10 minutes to complete. Kierstan and her folks over at Get to College can probably do it in 1 or 2. I don't know if they've ever timed it, but it is very simple, very straightforward. Unlike the FAFSA, we do not ask for any financial information on the MAAPP. So it is strictly, who are you, where are you going to school, what are you wanting to do? We encourage all graduating high school students to complete both the MAAPP and the FAFSA. And so that really is, if you hear nothing else today, please hear that. We strongly encourage you to do both applications, your students to do both applications. And really, it will simplify things for your student if they will do the FAFSA first, because that will simplify the supporting documents needed on the MAAPP. So let's, we can move on. MAAPP, you can go back to that slide. I'm gonna say just a few things first. MAAPP is both the application for students to apply, but it's also a student information system that students can see everything about the application they've submitted. They can see what documents they need. They can see what information we have on them that we've received from other sources. And also high school counselors and financial aid administrators at colleges can also access MAAPP to see all of that information. And this is good for you as counselors and teachers because you are able to use the MAAPP, log into MAAPP, see what we're seeing and advise your students. And so we refer to that aspect of MAAPP as the MAAPP dashboard. And we are going to spend the next few minutes letting me show you around MAAPP and tell you all the things that you can do within MAAPP. So next slide. This is just a screenshot of the main page of the Student Financial Aid website. And I'm showing you this because I'm want to show you how to easily get into MAAPP. There's a link on the front page of the website that says dashboard login request account. If you click there, you can get straight into MAAPP. And that will bring you, next slide. That will bring you here to the login, to the MAAPP login page. If you have forgotten your username or password, you can click forgot username or forgot password, or if you've forgotten both, you can click on one and then click on the other. If you don't have an account at all, you can click the blue request account button. Next screen. After you are able to successfully log in, you will see, the first thing you'll see is your MAAPP dashboard. And for the purpose of this presentation, these screenshots are taken from my high school counselor account. And obviously I'm not a high school counselor, but we have a fictitious school here in Mississippi called the Hospitality High School. And that is where I serve as a counselor for like 5 students. But so you can see how many of your students have completed applications. You can see how many of your students have completed the MAAPP, how many have completed the Fafsa, how many are missing documents like support documents that they need to complete their application. Some of those documents may be things that you as the counselor need to provide to us, such as the Help Core curriculum. You can see that on the dashboard with just a glance. Periodically, we will also display messages for counselors on the dashboard, like if we're trying to remind people to submit their high school grade file, we might put a message, and that will appear on this dashboard. Share portal pin. Those of you who have to submit the annual grade file know that you need to do that on the document share portal, which is a separate location. And those PIN numbers are sometimes hard to remember. So your PIN number can actually be seen at the top of your screen under your name. If you ever forget it, it's right there. And I think that's all I needed to say about the dashboard. So let's move on to the next slide. If you click on students on the side panel, the orange panel on the left-hand side, you will see a list of all of your students. And this list will include any student with a state aid application or a FAFSA for the selected age year. And we're going to show you two years worth. If you click on a student's name, then you will actually go to the student detail panel. So next slide. This is what you'll see if you actually click on one of those students' names. And now the student detail panel consists of multiple tabs. And this is virtually what a student sees when they log into their own account. So you can see almost exactly what they're seeing. Next slide. Sometimes we ask counselors to submit information, and most of the time counselors do that through the high school grade file that's submitted annually. But you can also submit information for individual students directly through MAAPP. And that is what these tabs are for. So this is what you see if you click on the high school tab within the student detail panel. And you can see that all their high school information shows there. And if you click on the blue box that says update student information, then it pulls up a form that you can fill in information. And so you can submit as the high school counselor, or even as a teacher that has access to MAAPP, you can submit information. You can submit a GPA. You can, and you don't have to submit all that information. You can submit 1 or 2 pieces of that information. And then you just save it. And then that actually comes to us in our office, and we update our database. Updates do not appear in real time. So if you go in and you update something for a student and it doesn't appear right away, that is because there is a delay in us processing that information. Next slide, you can click on reports in that side panel. And this brings you to a screen that will enable you to activate a bunch of filters. and then you can export those lists that you create. So let's just say that as a high school counselor, you want to create a list of all of your current high school seniors who have not completed the FAFSA, because you're going to do some outreach to those students to say, hey, what's the holdup? What are you doing? Let's get that FAFSA done. Or the MAAPP done, or you need to submit, you've got some missing documents that you've got to get in. Any kind of thing like that, you can create a list for that, and you can export that list from MAAPP. So that you're not trying to compare lists and see, well, I know this student told me they had done the FAFSA and this student's done the MAAPP. You can have that right at your fingertips directly from MAAPP. One thing that I will say here, we do our very, very best to match students. But as any of you know from working in schools and working with students, students don't always use the same information every time they fill out a form. Sometimes if their name is Richard, they may put Richard. And then sometime the next time they might fill it out as Rich or Bubba or whatever they go by. So sometimes, although we do our best to match students, we are sometimes unsuccessful in that effort. So if you have any data matching problems, please just contact our office and we'll be happy to help you get it straightened out. Okay, next slide. Just briefly, you can view your own activity log that shows when you have logged in and what action you have taken once you've been in MAAPP. So if you're like me and you forget, oh, did I update that student or not? Or, where did I got distracted and I got logged out. Where do I need to pick back up? You can see that. You can go to your activity log and you can see exactly what you've done and what you haven't. And then finally, you have access, next slide. You have access to your personal settings. So you can change your email address, you can change your password. You can even change your role or your high school. So let's say you're changing schools. Just note that if you are changing schools, you don't have to sign up for an entirely new account. You can just change your high school here, but you will have to be approved by the headmaster, superintendent, principal, whomever at your new school. You'll have to be given authority to access the information again. So once you change your school or change your role, you will lose your previous access until your new access is approved. Other updates, we can move straight on. I want to tell you a little bit about ACT Super Scores. By now, you probably all know that ACT is publishing Super Scores, and Super Score basically is just a composite score that is calculated from the highest subject test scores across all administrations of the test. So if the student has taken the test 4 or 5 times, they could potentially have subject test scores from all 4 tests that are combined into one super score. Super scores are included on the score reports for students who have taken the test more than once. They're also visible in a student's MyACT portal, and they're also included on the score files that the ACT is sending to the state. And so the board, the financial aid board, voted to accept ACT Super Scores for state aid eligibility last year. That vote was taken last year, and we are accepting ACT Super Scores for state aid eligibility. But there are a couple of caveats to that. We will not accept an unofficial super score. A student can't just call us and say, hey, I have a super score. We are not calculating super scores in our office too. So if a student sends us 3 score reports, we are not going to calculate that super score from the student. The student needs to officially request that the super score be reported to us. We are also asking that counselors not manually calculate the super scores. Now, if you as a counselor see the super score that's been calculated by ACT, and you want to submit that to us, that's fine. We just ask that you not manually calculate the super scores. And this, of course, we started accepting applicants for this current year, the 21-22 year. So last year's high school applicants were able to submit super scores to us. So this going in this year will be our second class of graduating high school students for whom we will accept super scores. One of the most important things we ask of our counselors is to submit grade files for graduating seniors. This is we ask counselors to do this for every single graduating high school student in the state. And we prefer to receive these files in January or February. We only need a 7-semester GPA, so we only need the GPA through December. So we encourage you not to wait until you know, March, April. First of all, because your students will pester the mess out of you, and we don't want that for you. And also because there really is, unless a student really pulls up their grades during that final semester, we're fine with just accepting this 7-semester GPA. And for any student who does have a drastic change in GPA, you can always just submit an updated GPA through the MAAPP portal for an individual student after the fact. We also need, from that grade file, we need the ACT score. If you have it, sometimes we get them directly from ACT, sometimes we don't. So that just ensures that we have their students' highest ACT score. And then also the curriculum certification. Now, I would love to say that I am the end all be all for knowledge in my office, but I, you know, sometimes may steer you the wrong way. So if you have any questions about your high school grade file, your best bet is to contact Brandon Johnson in our office. He is fabulous and patient and kind and will help you with any questions that you have about submitting, developing, creating your high school grade file. And his contact information is right there on the screen. Best way to get him is just to email him directly at bjohnson@mississippi.edu. The final thing I wanted to mention is the help curriculum certification task. This is another very, very important task that we rely on our high school counselors for. All state aid applicants are being automatically considered for the help grant now because we have so many help grant applicants. So when you submit your high school grade file or when you submit student information through MAAPP, if you're only doing it for a handful of students, please do include the help curriculum certification for each student for whom you provide information. Not just select students that you think will be eligible for help, because sometimes students that you don't even expect to qualify for help will actually qualify for help. So if you can do that for all of your students, that would be best. There has been some confusion over this request in the past. So just to clarify, when you certify the help curriculum, you are only certifying that a student has or has not completed the help curriculum. You are not certifying that the student is overall eligible for help or meets all of the help requirements. We will make that assessment in our office. All you are telling us is this student has or has not completed the help curriculum. So what is the help curriculum? The help curriculum used to be for all students who've graduated in 2021 or before, IHL required CPC plus 1 advanced elective. The new help curriculum for 22 graduates, so what you need to be worrying about for all your students moving forward, is that the CPC, I mean, the help curriculum is just exactly equal to the IHL required CPC. No additional classes, no exceptions. Exactly, they are fully aligned at this point, which we're really excited about. And then I think that's it. So, but just, on behalf of our office, we wish you a wonderful, successful year. Hopefully you'll get to stay there all year. And just know that we appreciate each and every one of you so much for what you do. And we certainly couldn't do our jobs without you. So best of luck to you this year. And I'll answer any questions. I don't know if y'all want to do it now or later.
I think Kierstan dropped something in the chat. I'm seeing that. So we did have one question. Maybe we'll go ahead and answer it since you're here. They said they work with students who earn a GED, high school equivalency diploma. Is MAAPP only for students who have an ACT score and associated with a high school counselor? I asked because I have a few students who took the ACT before withdrawing from a high school. I can get their ACT score from their ACT accounts, but have no way to upload other documents that they may need. Yeah, trying to get GED can qualify for state aid.
So that's kind of a multi-pronged question here. First of all, if you work with either a college or a high school, if you're associated with a college or a high school, we can get you access into MAAPP as a counselor so that you could submit information. Regarding whether or not GED students can qualify for state aid, they would probably only qualify for MTAG, not, or I guess possibly MESG if they have a really, really high, well, they wouldn't have the high school GPA. They could potentially qualify for MTAG. But they would not qualify for help because they would not be able to have that curriculum, that you wouldn't be able to certify that completion of that help core curriculum. So yes, we receive applications from GED students frequently. ACT scores can be submitted for anyone who's ever taken the ACT. And then I guess Kierstan may have something to add.
Yeah, so for federal aid, they can complete the FAFSA. They would just indicate GED as far as the high school diploma or high school completion degree on that.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Are you seeing any others, Kierstan? Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer. We will turn it over now to Kierstan. I think she was going to take control of the screen.
All right, so welcome to the federal update section of this presentation. We're excited to share with you kind of some things to keep in mind as we go through the year. Shannon, I think you're still moving things, so I'm going to move it back. You won't be able to click on anything. Okay. All right. So here are the updates in the space of the FAFSA and federal aid for the 21-22 academic year. We just want to remind you that the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is just an application. And so building that awareness with your students is a really important piece, particularly with your parents, as there's a lot of myths that go around to the FAFSA. So we are going to kind of go through some of the importance of the FAFSA to begin. Mississippi students who complete the FAFSA are 4 times more likely to enroll in post-secondary. This data comes directly from Mississippi students here in Mississippi. Get to College worked with the Social Science Research Center at Mississippi State University a few years back for set high schools all across the state. And we did some research and we said, okay, of all of the indicators of enrollment in college, what are the strongest? And so we looked at the number of applications submitted for admission. We looked at college tours, being on campus versus talking to a recruiter and FAFSA completion, and FAFSA completion was the largest indicator. Mississippi has the most Pell eligible students and Pell recipients. And so that shows that the need for financial aid is a large motivator in students. And just like Jennifer shared, there's a lot of aid that are available for students in the state of Mississippi from the state. There's also federal aid that's available for Mississippi students. And so let's look and see what Mississippi looks like in this national stage in FAFSA completion. So these charts that you see on the screen, there's a lot of squiggly lines. I really just kind of wanted to show you the one on the left is year over year at these points from October 1, 2020 through the end of August of 21. So the class of 21 graduating high school year over year. That blue line is the national average. You can see that FAFSA completion has been down nationally, ended at about 4.2% down year over year. That orange line on that left graph, that is in Mississippi. We took a huge dip. We came back a bit, but we have been down over the majority of the FAFSA completion cycle and still ended up being down about 5.2% at the end of the FAFSA cycle. So the one on the right, the blue again is that national. So nationally, FAFSA completion landed at about 54.3% at the end of August, and Mississippi ended at 68.5%. So what does that mean in the scope of everybody else? We're above national, which is great, but how did we rank with everyone else? Well, we actually ended up ranking number 4 in the country. Historically, last year we were ranked number 5, and the year before that, number 3. So we end well in FAFSA completion, and this is at the end of August. So think about your seniors in 21. They have enrolled in college at this point, and so they are, we look at the end of August because that's usually a really good scope of those seniors. But we wanted to do it earlier, right? We're glad that we got to that percentage point of 69%, but we would really love to get that to be in early March. As Jennifer mentioned, that HELP grant eligibility is very important by March 31st. So early FAFSA completion is really important here. But great job, everybody. Let's celebrate Mississippi and our FAFSA completion and being ranked number 4 nationally. So here's some reminders for the upcoming year. The FAFSA opens for the 22-23 academic year on October the 1st. So your seniors that are graduating May 2022, they will be using and doing the 22-23 FAFSA for the academic semesters of fall 22, spring 23, summer 23. The tax year, like we had in that entry poll, will be prior year. So the tax information you need to share with your students and parents to bring to the FAFSA appointments will be the 2020 taxes. Hopefully everybody has been able to file. If you have families that have had extensions, they can wait until they filed it. We've got October 1 to March 31st is really our FAFSA window in Mississippi. Well, they can do it after March 31st. We wanted to make sure that they receive all the eligibility possible with that state aid that we learned about earlier. But they can also, say they will file if they've got an extension and go in and correct that. But 2020 is the tax year that we'll be using. And as a reminder, as you share information with your students and parents, only information that is used on the FAFSA is either student and biological or adoptive parent or student only. We've got some YouTube videos and we've got some resources. You've probably come to us for FAFSA training and you understand what it means to be an independent or dependent student on the FAFSA, but know that we don't use anyone's information other than biological or adoptive parent and student, or only student if they can meet that independent criteria. So there are some FAFSA myths that are out there. And so we want to just share with you as you gear up and have these conversations in your classrooms or with your student organizations or things like that about making sure the correct information is shared with students and parents. And there's some misconceptions. So we want to kind of debunk those before we look at the details of what the new FAFSA will look like. The first one is student whose parents do not file taxes cannot complete the FAFSA. We often hear, because we just told you it's 2020 tax information, if a parent or a family member of the student that they have, such as their adoptive parent or the student themselves, didn't file taxes because they are not required to file taxes, they can't complete the FAFSA. This is not true. Those students are the ones that probably need to complete the FAFSA the most. They will more than likely have the most financial need. And so making sure that the families understand, just because they didn't file taxes because they maybe didn't have wages, tips, and salary for 2020, maybe they were affected by COVID and, were unemployed for a significant portion of the year and don't meet that tax required threshold, they can still complete the FAFSA and absolutely should. One of the other myths that we often hear is students who live with their grandparents use grandparents' tax information. As I just told you, we only use student and biological or adoptive parent. So although we have a lot of students in Mississippi who are raised by grandparents or other family members other than a biological or adoptive parent, unless that other person adopted the student, we have to use the student's biological parent. And so there are some rules kind of figuring out who that parent is if the parents aren't married to each other and things like that. You can join us on October 4th for FAFSA training. We've also got a lot of YouTube videos that kind of explain what this means. We'll also see in a second that the FAFSA's kind of changed to help with this. But ultimately, no, even if grandparents are at the appointment with the student, we can't use grandparents' information. So educating them on the front end that will have to be student only or student biological or adoptive parent. The next is the parent who claimed the student on their 2020 tax return is who needs to be used on the FAFSA. And this is not true. The general rule of thumb is if the parents of the student are not married to each other, then it's the student who is financially supported majority of the year by that parent that they are financially supported with. In most high school settings, that means it's the parent that the student lives with the majority of the year. So in a very common divorce custody setup, you often will have parent one that the student lives with during the week and then parent two every other weekend. In that case, it would be parent one as they are providing the most support where the student is living the majority of the time. And so if there's some equal living situations, then it's financially who supports them the most. So it's generally who the student lives with the majority of the time. And that's kind of the probing question that we suggest you ask. Even if dad claimed the student on the taxes, well, dad gets every other weekend, it's who do you live with the majority of the time? And another myth that we often see is undocumented parents cannot be used on the FAFSA. This is a myth. In fact, undocumented parents, if a student is an eligible non-citizen or the student themselves are a citizen of the United States and are not independent as defined by the FAFSA, they have to use parents' information regardless of parents' undocumented status. And so you would have the student still provide parent information. They would not have a social security number, so you put all zeros in the FAFSA and still provide, oftentimes undocumented parents have filed taxes. And so you would have that tax return and manually input that. So they absolutely can and are required to still use parents' information regardless of parent citizenship status. And then the last one that we often hear we wanted to share is that legal guardian information is used as a parent on the FAFSA. So it can get a little confusing. Oftentimes the words of legal guardian and custody are different than what the FAFSA kind of defines it. And so know that if a student is in a legal guardianship, that the student is independent, meaning that they are only student information on the FAFSA. So while we appreciate the support of that legal guardian and the appointment for the student, we don't actually need the legal guardian's information. We only need the student's information and what they filed taxes or wages, tips, and salary from the 2020 year. So just know that if you know the situation of that student, that they will only use their information, and the legal guardian is absolutely welcome to join in the appointment, and that will be explained to them why their information is not needed, but we won't need their tax information. So let's kind of move on to hear about what are the new things for the 22-23 FAFSA that are coming up. The selective service question is still on the application, but it is not required for federal aid. This was a change that happened over the summer. The application itself did not get, the change happened too short of time for the actual FAFSA to remove this question. So it'll still be in the traditional format where if it's a male, indicate their gender as a male, that if they've registered for selective service, it will still be there, but it's no longer required for receiving federal aid. The next change is that there is a drug conviction question. It will also no longer impact applicants' eligibility for federal aid. Same scenario, it will still remain on the FAFSA. This is for renewals. On FAFSA, it's asked if they've been convicted of possession or selling of drugs while receiving federal student aid. So any renewals that you're helping with, that question will still remain, but regardless of how it's answered, it will not affect the student's eligibility for federal aid. So let's look at some visuals that we're going to see that are going to look different. Federal student aid changed how the FAFSA actually looks to align more with the new studentaid.gov kind of more basic, streamlined, minimalist look. And so the old login page for the FAFSA, you can see on the screen. The new login page is not going to have as much differentiation in the colors. It's going to be a little bit more graphically visual. So while it still gives you the option that I am the student or a parent or a student from a freely associated state, they just look differently on that initial login page. When you get to the inputting or creating of the FSA ID for the student to log into the FAFSA, the change is a little bit more streamlined where it's an extra page. This initially was what would come up on the tabs. Now it's going to give you a little bit more defined of creating that FSA ID or logging it in, and then there's an extra page. It also will allow the student to log in without an FSA ID, just putting in their name, social, birthday, but we encourage students to log in with that FSA ID because ultimately it will be needed to sign the FAFSA electronically as well as utilizing the IRS data retrieval if they file taxes. So this is what that login, it's now a third page, if you will, versus initially on that first page. And then this was the landing kind of starting of the FAFSA when it comes in, once you've selected which FAFSA year that you're going to be completing. This is what it looks like now. Just keep in mind the thing you may want to be aware of is that if you are the school don't have very good monitors, that your contrast isn't very strong on the display, you may want to adapt to your computer monitor for that, because while the old form had a little bit more contrast in which boxes to fill in, the new form will not. It'll all be white background with just slight variations of those boxes. So visually a little bit different, but generally the information is the same for the students in the order that they're going to be inputting. For the adding of the high school, this is a more significant change here. While traditionally it had where you would manually put in the school name, the city, and the state, and then hit confirm, or you could hit the next button. Now it only gives you the search. So that was something that oftentimes we would see students maybe skip the confirm. The search makes each one to be confirmed, which is good because it makes sure that the information matches on the backside of the FAFSA for the high school listed. Then you can still add a school manually. So if you're working with a student that doesn't have a school listed, it does give you that option once you hit the search to manually input the information from the school. Maybe it had previously closed if you're working with an adult student or something like that, and it's not an option that's listed on the search. The listing and that high school search feature visually looks a little bit different. So once you hit search, it now is you select the checkbox versus hitting the select button, and then it will allow you to continue from there. So this is the college search. So you can still provide the federal school code, or you can search by name. The new look of it is just a little bit more aligned with the high school. So you can see here that you can still, the tabs are there instead of it being, do you know the federal school code as a radio button? It's now a tab on the backside that you can search by federal school code, but it defaults to searching by the college's name. And then it has you go to that search feature. This is the page that comes at the end of the information of the independent dependent, where it asks if you'll be providing parent information if the student is dependent. It says note all those dependency questions. And then it would take you directly into what your parent's marital status if you're providing parent information on the old form. The new form, this is probably the largest area of change that we've seen on the 22-23 FAFSA. This shows you that it now goes directly into you're providing parent information and whose information should be provided. Federal student aid made a promise that they're going to make this more clarifying. And so this is their way of making this more clarifying. So what this means is that it gives you a few scenarios here on the student and figuring out which of their parents. There are some scenarios not listed here. Not every parent's marital status, such as never married or widowed or divorced, it is not provided here. So you're going to have to scroll down on the screen in order to move past this checklist. But this is intended to help the student figure out on their own who is the parent, since the rules on the FAFSA are a little bit more complicated than what general population probably thinks about. So then it takes you to that next page after that question says, what is your parent's marital status as of today, after that parent has been defined. And as we kind of talk through some of those myths, we know that information sometimes is a little bit more challenging to understand. And this does have all the marital statuses here. So if you're working with a student and they're concerned because their parents are never married and it's not listed there, keep moving through the FAFSA. It'll give you that option here. All right, so another large area of change visually in the FAFSA is the household size worksheet. You can see that the left side has what was the household size worksheet, where the student would fill in about siblings that can be counted and other individuals in the number in college. Now it breaks it down even more into more pieces. While it doesn't provide the calculation of the student and the parent that was previously inputted, it does define a little bit more of who that other sibling is, and then who can be defined as other. And just as a reminder, the other individuals are an and category, while the siblings are an or category. And that's kind of specified here. You can see the or in bold and the and in bold here to help with that clarification. And then this is a totally new page that calculates the number in the household on behalf of the student based off the previous information. And then this highlights where to put the number of those categories that are in college currently. So it's a little bit more visually appealing than that standard like kind of format that was the old household size. And then the end of the FAFSA does look a little bit different. So while we traditionally have that review of all of the information, it's essentially the SAR for the students prior to this page, after asking if you're a preparer, then you sign for the student and you would agree to the terms. That is done kind of beforehand for the student. So now there is a whole review page that is several different pages, and then there is the agree to terms and conditions before you get to that signature. So the review and the agreement is for the student. You still have to do the click for the parents to sign, which you can see the old one and this is the new one. They have that same agree, what that looks like on this slide here for the parents as well. It just is done when you click on that sign for the parent on the FAFSA. And then the confirmation page looks a little bit different as well. Well, this was a traditional confirmation page. We're excited that you can still link to the Mississippi Aid application from the FAFSA. In fact, we encourage you to do that. It makes it so much easier. Like Jennifer said, it's about 10 minutes, but when you link from the FAFSA on that block that says link to state aid application, it really does take you to about 4 minutes to complete it because majority of that information is already answered by linking. So this is what the new page looks like. As you can see, the contrast is not as strong. So you'll still have that drop down. You'll still below what you see on this screen here have the ability to link over and all of that. So just wanted to make you aware of what those changes look like. Now we've got some really big changes that are coming that we want to give you a small taste of what this means for your students, particularly if you work in a school setting where you've got several different grades that you're going to be working with, because there are major FAFSA changes that are going to be happening and changes coming. So for the 24-25 academic year is the planned date for the release of the simplified FAFSA. I got to be on a really cool task force that helps to clarify some of these things with questions. And so federal student aid is still trying to figure out what does the law mean in terms of the simplification and how does that implementation work. So they pushed it back by a year. You may have heard it was initially for the 23-24 year. Well, it's actually 24-25. So who does that affect? It applies to your graduating class of 22, your seniors right now, if they're completing a bachelor's degree. So they'll, in their 24-25 academic year, be affected by these FAFSA changes. For your class of 23, your juniors, if they're doing an associate's degree and beyond, they will be affected by this. If they're doing a one-year certificate program, it won't affect them. And then your sophomores, the class of 24 and beyond, will be affected by this FAFSA. It's really important to pay attention to this, particularly as you educate families who have more than one student within the senior to sophomore classes, because they may be eligible for some Pell Grant based off having two students in college for the next 2 years, but then that will change in the future. So just kind of building that awareness that the change is coming and it's the class of 24 moving forward. There are three major things that I want you to know. I'm not going to dig into technicals here. Federal student aid is not prepared for us to dig into technicals. We're not prepared, but there's some general things for those families that have current seniors and then maybe a junior right behind it that they need to know, or maybe a senior and a sophomore, because once the FAFSA simplification happens, the first thing is that the EFC, the expected family contribution, will become the SAI, the student aid index. What this means is that it's going to be based off the poverty tables. And so it actually expands eligibility for most students in Mississippi. As I mentioned earlier, Mississippi is a state that has a lot of Pell eligible students. And so this actually works in most students' favor, not every student, but most students' favor by expanding how eligibility for federal aid is calculated. So you'll see things that say SAI. Well, that's student aid index, and it's taking the place of the only thing that the FAFSA calculates, which is kind of the eligibility need amount. There's actually going to be a negative SAI. And so we'll dig into that as it gets closer to the 24 FAFSA season. The second thing is that the number in college no longer affects the FAFSA formula, so the SAI. Well, right now you saw on that FAFSA, the number in college affects a lot of the eligibility for potentially federal aid or institutional aid. It affects the EFC formula quite a bit. Moving forward, it will not affect that. So it is a variable that is very strong right now. And as I mentioned earlier, is a piece that if you've got more than one in college currently and in the future by the 24 year, will want to be factored in for families. And then the third thing is that while right now businesses and farms with 100 employees or less are not considered an asset, moving forward on the 24-25 year, they will be considered an asset regardless of how many employees that they have. So those families that have small businesses or farms will now be considered as a part of their personal property and as a part of their income and not exempt from assets. So just a small taste of what some of these changes mean. There's a lot of bigger changes that are coming that need better definition. So if you will follow Get to College on social media, we do a lot of updates, particularly on our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channels that are around this. We'll provide you with walkthroughs and things like that. So make sure you follow us on social media to be the most up to date.
Okay. There, I was looking to see if we had any questions in the chat. I think it's mostly folks looking for a link to the recording. And we will definitely send you a link to the recording, as we said earlier. for this, because I know that many of you have colleagues who couldn't get away, or maybe you were interrupted yourself as you tried to listen and participate in this webinar. So we will definitely send that recording out. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop that in the chat or the Q&A, and Kierstan, I'll let you look at that as we continue. Is there anything else there now?
There's a question asking when Get to College will begin FAFSA virtual appointments.
Okay, so we will begin doing virtual appointments as soon as the FAFSA opens on October 1st, if you're looking to do this 22-23 application. So we are already taking appointments. You can go online and sign up for an appointment. You can sign up for an in-office appointment or a virtual appointment. So that's already available, but just know if you're looking to do the 22-23 FAFSA, don't sign up for an appointment until after August 1st. And one other piece of advice I would probably give is you don't have to do the FAFSA the very first week it opens, okay? Because I will tell you, our office will be pretty booked. I haven't even looked at our calendars. We probably are already booked that first week. So just know you still have plenty of time. You don't have to do it August 1st. You don't even have to do it in the month of October if you don't want to. But I would encourage you to go ahead maybe and try to get an appointment set up online or by calling our office, because we will fill up very quickly if you are wanting to get an October date.
We got one more question, Shannon. Do the participants need to do anything to qualify for CU credits from the Topic Tuesday webinars?
So I will keep track of, we are able to keep track of who attends this Zoom meeting through Zoom itself. And I keep track of the names and emails of the folks who attended each one of these webinars. And we will, I'll talk to you, I'll say this again at the end, but if you participate in all 5 this fall, you'll get 0.5 CEUs. And if you participate in the ones that we'll be offering in the spring, that would get you to 10, and you could get 1 full CEU. So I'll mention that again at the end. Anything else?
That's it.
All right, well, perfect. We'll kind of move on to a few other things that we want you guys to know before we end today. So we appreciate you, Jennifer and Kierstan. And like we said, we will email the recording for this webinar in the next couple of days, and we'll also post it on our YouTube channel. We would appreciate it if you would complete this short survey that will automatically pop up at the end of this meeting. Please fill that out and give us feedback on today's webinar so we can continue improving these webinars. Stay tuned for our next Topic Tuesday webinar, which will be on Tuesday, October the 5th. During that webinar, we will be hearing from a staff member at dream.us about how to support undocumented students in the admission and financial aid process. We will continue this webinar series throughout the fall semester, and you see the other topics listed there. And as I said earlier, if you participate in all 5 webinars this fall, you will have the opportunity to apply for 0.5 CEUs. And then we will have a Spring Topic Tuesday series with additional CEUs opportunities. And that information about the Spring Topic Tuesdays is on our webinar, or I'm sorry, is on our website as well. These remaining webinars for the fall semester will include the topics listed, such as NCAA Student Clearinghouse and Counselor Portal Explained, and then information about Phi Theta Kappa International Society. So that's what you have to look forward to for the remaining Topic Tuesday sessions. You can register for these webinars on our Get to College website. They are listed under the Educator tab, and then choose Professional Development. While you're there registering, please check out all the other resources for you and your students listed under the Educator tab. A few more virtual training opportunities that will be coming up. We will have another session to do FAFSA and MAAPP updates on September 28th at 10 a.m. So if some of you missed part of this, or if some of your colleagues want to watch something live, it'll be very similar to what we just presented, except Jennifer won't be there, and I'll just kind of be going over the small details. She went more into the details with you guys today than we'll do on Tuesday, September 28th. But join us again then if you want to get more FAFSA and MAAPP updates. And then very important, our last FAFSA training for the fall is happening on Monday, October 4th in the afternoon hours, and there will be CEU opportunities available for that. And then we also have a new college access educator training that we're really excited about that will be on November 10th and January 19th. You can register for all these trainings again on the Get to College website under professional development. We also, for those of you who either teach CCR, that college and career readiness class, or know of teachers or educators who are teaching that class, once a month, Kierstan and some of our staff here at Get to College host the college and career teacher chat. So you see those dates there. And you can register there on our website, and those take place after the school hours, 3:30 to 4:15. And this is just an opportunity for those CCR teachers to get together to kind of discuss any issues or things that are working or not working as they teach those CCR classes. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach us at the contact information shared on the screen. And again, we look forward to seeing you in October for our next Topic Tuesday session. So we hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all again very soon.